Good morning. On this occasion of the International Day for Persons with Disabilities, it is important that we all recall that the African Disability Protocol came into force on the continent over a year ago. One of the standards which the protocol affirms is the duty of employers in the public sector and the private sector to provide reasonable accommodation measures to employees with disabilities. During this day, stakeholders and allies of persons with disabilities should recognize the significant lack of knowledge and capacity by employers across Africa on the meaning and implications of the duty to provide reasonable accommodation. Employers assume that providing reasonable accommodation measures is onerous and that it detracts from their core business of providing services or making a profit. I recall a manager who came back to me and said, "Lawrence, can you please rewrite your request using other terms? When you request for reasonable accommodation, my colleagues think you want them to give you a house to live in." The message we must communicate to employers across Africa is that the duty to provide reasonable accommodation is not particularly onerous. Indeed, it involves often quite obvious adjustments or modifications in recruitment or in the workplace with no significant costs. It is about reallocating filing and carrying heavy reports away from an administrative assistant who has a mobility disability so that she may focus on her essential tasks. It is about sensitizing the colleagues of an accountant with a hearing disability to the disability and using alternative means of communication such as email or written messages or the assistive communication technology or human assistance. It is about scheduling the lessons of a teacher with psychosocial disability who finds it difficult to concentrate earlier in the day to later in the day. Clearly, this is not to say that extra costs may not be involved to provide reasonable accommodation measures. A lawyer who is blind may require a personal assistant who can double up as a guide or driver and reader. The point to keep in mind always is that reasonable accommodation measures should be agreed between an employer and an employee on a case-by-case basis. An employer should not assume that because an employee is deaf, they must require exactly the same reasonable accommodation as other employees with disabilities. My message on this day then is nothing about work without us. Thank you.